What do you think? Are you lucky? The profession that you are in, it is totally insignificant whether you are lucky or not. All that matters is how well you have understood your concepts, how much you have practiced it. And you will notice that the more you work hard, the more you improve your skill, the luckier you become. So whether you're lucky or not, if you want to become lucky, you know the secret. So with that, we start with a very important topic of the nose, the nerve supply of the nose. And recently, we have many questions that are being asked in your exams from this topic. So can you think and tell me what are the nerves in the nose? What is the nerve supply of the nose? What all nerves we have in the nose? Okay, very good, very good. We have olfaction. Okay, so we have for smell, that is the olfactory nerve. So we have olfactory nerve. That is for smell. Wonderful. Any other? Do we have any nerves for sensation also in the nose? Of course, we will have it. So yes, we have the sensory nerves in the nose. Sensory nerves. And also we have another nerve supply in the nose, and that is for the nasal secretions. That is the parasympathetic supply of the nose. So the parasympathetic supply of the nose. So we will do them one by one, and when we do the nerves, we will do the clinical significance of these nerves along with it. So we first start with the nerves for olfaction, that is the olfactory nerves. Now, why at all do we need olfaction? Yes, with COVID, everybody knew the significance of olfaction. There were so many patients who came with a complaint that if there was anything burning in the kitchen, they couldn't make out. If the gas was on, they couldn't smell the gas that it was leaking. When they took any food which had been kept in the fridge, they cannot just smell and make out whether it was spoiled or not. They cannot make out if something was rotten and they were near to that. Yes, so smell is very, very important for safety. Also, there were many patients who came with a complaint of loss of weight. How is smell related to loss of weight? Now, whenever we chew the food that we are eating, the air passes through behind the palate and it reaches the olfactory mucosa. And that adds on to the flavor of food, which adds on to the taste of food. So, food becomes tasteless if smell is not there, and that leads to loss of weight. Also, smell is responsible for adding emotions to memories. You must have always noticed that you smell something and suddenly you get reminded of something, that yes, this is the perfume that my mom used to use, this is the perfume that my dad used to use. So yes, it is responsible for adding flavor to food. It is also responsible for adding emotions to memories. And we do not recognize the significance of smell, of olfaction, unless and until we lose it. So what exactly happens when anything goes inside? How are we able to smell it? Yes, so let us see that. So where is the olfactory mucosa present? Can you tell me? Yes, very good. It is present in the upper one-third. Upper one-third of what? Upper one-third of lateral wall, upper one-third of septum. Yes, the whole of the upper one-third of the nose, the upper one-third of the septum, upper one-third of the lateral wall, and the whole of the roof. That is lined by the olfactory mucosa that we already know. This is olfactory mucosa. Now, we already know that whenever we breathe normally, air passes through which part of the nose? Do you remember this? We have done that. Yes, air passes through the middle part of the nose. And how much air normally reaches the olfactory mucosa? Only around 10 to 15% of the air. That is why when we have to smell something very properly, what do? Yes, we sniff. So normally only 10 to 15% of the air reaches the olfactory mucosa. So now what happens is that whenever we are breathing in, the odorant molecules, they enter the nose through two pathways. This is what is the nasal pathway. The nasal pathway. And also when we are chewing the food, we also know that the air passes from behind the palate to reach the olfactory mucosa. That is what is known as the That is what is known as the retronasal pathway. Retronasal pathway. So now the odorant molecules, they reach up till the olfactory mucosa area. Now when it has reached the olfactory mucosa area, there it mixes with the mucus and it is picked up by the sensory cells. Now what are these? What is the sensory epithelium? What are the sensory receptors? These sensory receptors are the dendrites of these bipolar cells. Can you make out these bipolar cells? So the dendrites of the bipolar cells are the sensory receptors. Dendrites of bipolar cells. These are the receptors. These are the sensory receptors. And the axons of these bipolar cells, they fuse to form the olfactory nerves. Olfactory nerves, they are around 12 to 20 in number, and these olfactory nerves then pierce the cribriform plate. We know that the roof is the cribriform plate. Cribriform because it has multiple openings. Cribriform. It enters through the cribriform plate to enter into the olfactory bulb, right? The olfactory bulb. Now, these nerves which are going from the olfactory mucosa to the olfactory bulb, they are unmyelinated. So they act as a pathway for transmission of infection from the nasal cavity to the brain. That is why this area of the nose is what is known as the dangerous area of nose. So this is what is the dangerous area of nose. Why it is known so? You know that. So any nasal infection, can it lead to meningitis? Yes, it can, through the dangerous area of the nose. And don't confuse this with the dangerous area of the face. The dangerous area of the face is this triangular area. And why this is known as dangerous? Because from here, the venous drainage, that is the deep facial vein, it communicates with the pterygoid plexus of veins. With the pterygoid plexus, which has communication with the cavernous sinus. So any infection in this area can lead to cavernous sinus thrombosis. So that is why this is known as the dangerous area of the face. Now once the nerves have reached the olfactory bulb, here they synapse with the dendrites of these cells. They are known as the mitral and the tufted cells. Two types of cells here. Mitrals and the tufted cells, the dendrites of which synapse with the nerves, the olfactory nerves. And now the axons of these cells, they fuse to form what is known as the olfactory tract. So the axons, they will form the olfactory tract. And this olfactory tract will now go and synapse with multiple areas in the brain. So it will go and synapse with the olfactory cortex, which is in the temporal lobe. So there are primary olfactory cortex and association areas. So in the temporal lobe, we have the primary olfactory cortex, where you should know a few names which are associated with olfaction in these areas. One is known as piriform cortex. This is actually present at the junction of the frontal and the temporal lobe. We have the entorhinal cortex. This is in the temporal lobe. So all this is responsible for conscious perception of smells. So whenever anything enters into your nose, any odorant, you are able to identify that yes, this is, I have smelled something. Yes, so that is the conscious perception of smell. Now it also goes to the hippocampus, and that is responsible for olfactory memory. So once you have smelled something and you know that yes, this is coffee, next time wherever you smell coffee, you immediately know that yes, this is coffee that I am smelling. So that gives you olfactory memory. And very, very important is the connection which is to the amygdala and also to the hypothalamus. And that is responsible for the emotional responses to smell. And yes, also you must have noticed that whenever you smell some bad rotten food or some bad decaying material, you feel pukish. Yes, so that is through the connection of these nerves to the reticular formation area. It is responsible for the visceral responses. Now let us quickly see how we test olfaction. you will first have to explain the procedure to the patient. I'm going to test your smell sensation. You will have to keep your eyes closed and you have to close one nostril like this.
Okay.
So you can now close your eyes and yes, close your one nostril. Now, once the patient has closed his eyes and closed one nostril, so we are testing the other nostril now. And what are you going to use for testing the smell? Yes, remember it should not be a irritant. You cannot test, it is asked in your exam, can you use ammonia for testing smell? Any irritant is sensed by the sensory nerves. So you will get a false result. Patient will sense it even if his olfaction is not there. So, yes, just smell this. Can you smell something?
Yes.
What is it?
Coffee.
Coffee. Okay. So, you are going to use a familiar substance. You are going to ask two questions from the patient. First, can you smell something? And when he says yes, only then you're going to ask what is the thing that you are smelling. And then you can repeat the same for the other nostril with preferably a different substance. So we just saw how we test for the smell, that is the olfaction, that is the first cranial nerve. So yes, it should be a non-irritating substance, it should be a familiar substance, and the two questions that you have to ask is whether you can smell or not, and if yes, what is the smell. Now this smell testing can also be done by scratch and sniff cards, which are very commonly used, and these are known as the UPSIT or the University of Pennsylvania smell identification test. These are scratch and sniff. The patient has to scratch here, sniff, and he has to identify what he is able to smell, and this is compared with the control, and accordingly the result is given. So now let us see that what can be the causes of decreased smell and what are the various pathologies of smell sensation. Now we already know that whenever we breathe, the odorants enter the nose through the air that we are breathing in. So which means that whenever there is a blockade in the nose because of any mass, any obstruction, it can be a deviation of the septum, it can be polyps in the nose, it can be any tumors, it can be any other mass in the nose, concha, like it can be concha. You know what is concha? What is concha? Yes, you know, of course. Tell me what is concha? Concha bullosa. What is that? Yes, that is a pneumatized turbinate. Yes, if there is any hypertrophic turbinate, so any of these will block the conduction of the odorant molecules and they will not be able to reach up to the olfactory mucosa. So this is what is known as conduction block. So they will lead to conduction block, and this conduction block usually leads to decreased sense of smell, and this decreased sense of smell is known as hyposmia. It is known as hyposmia, right? Now also there can be a complete loss of smell, not a decreased sense of smell but a complete loss of smell. A complete loss of smell is what is known as anosmia. Then what can be the causes of anosmia? Yes, can these obstruction in the nose can also lead to anosmia? Yes, bilateral polyps. The nose is filled with polyps and there is no space for the air to go up. So yes, it can be in bilateral complete block. Bilateral complete block as in bilateral polyps, or it can occur because of damage to the mucosa, damage to the olfactory mucosa, Yes, and do you know of any condition where there can be damage to olfactory mucosa? Very, very commonly viral infections. Yes, simple rhinitis, simple viral infection with rhinovirus, or yes, we saw it so commonly in COVID. That is also a viral infection. So viral infections can lead to either temporary or permanent loss of these olfactory mucosa and olfactory sensory receptors, leading to anosmia. So there can be damage to olfactory mucosa that can occur in viral infections. That can also occur in a condition of the nose, which we will do in great detail later on. That is known as atrophic rhinitis. For now, just remember that atrophic rhinitis, as the name, everything in the nose atrophies. So the mucosa atrophies, the nerves atrophy. So everything, the mucosa as well as the nerve has atrophied. So patient has complete anosmia. Now also it can occur because of when the nerves have got transected. So that can occur, yes, because of fracture of cribriform plate. Cribriform plate fractures. There can be a complete transection of the nerves leading to anosmia. Now also, if there is any tumor in this area of the frontal lobe, meningiomas are common in this area, so they can also lead to anosmia. So, or meningiomas, frontal lobe tumors, they can lead to anosmia. Now, there are certain other named terms in relation to olfactory disorders. So yes, we know what is hyposmia. We have already written that. It is because of conduction block. We know what is anosmia. Anosmia is total loss of smell. Total loss of smell. That can occur either because of damage to mucosa, damage to the nerves, or damage to olfactory tracts. Damage to nerves when it is getting transected, or because of infections, damage to tracts when it is occurring because of frontal lobe tumors like meningiomas. Now there is a condition which is known as parosmia. Parosmia or cacoxmia or dysosmia. Now what is that? That is perversion of smell. Perversion of smell. What is that? Yes, perversion of smell is that good smell also appears bad. Perversion of smell. That occurs usually during the recovery phase following any viral infection if the nerve is recovering. So because of aberrant regeneration, there occurs parosmia or cacoxmia, and usually it is temporary. So there were so many patients who came in following COVID who came with a complaint that whose loss was a little more for a little more duration. They complained that whatever food that they are seeing, they are going to eat, it smells like rotten eggs and they feel like puking the moment they see the food also. So that is parosmia or cacoxmia or dysosmia. Now what is phantosmia? Phantosmia means that the patient is smelling something in spite of no smell anywhere. So that is seen in cases of temporal lobe seizures. We know that the primary olfactory cortex is in the area of temporal lobe, and we also know that temporal lobe is the area for origin for fits. So yes, temporal lobe seizures. There is phantosmia. And presbyosmia, this you will tell me. Presby, what is the meaning of presby? Presby means age related. So yes, age related, yes, age leads to degeneration, atrophy, loss of all the nerves of the body. So why not the olfaction? So yes, that is age related decrease of smell. And very, very important is that the loss of smell is a very early sign of many neurodegenerative conditions, like for example Alzheimer's. It is an early sign of Alzheimer's. It is an early sign of Parkinsonisms. It is an early sign of multiple sclerosis. So any patient who has come to you with a complaint of decreased sense of smell or loss of smell, and you have investigated the patient, you have done an endoscopy, that is so easy to rule out a conductive block, and everything looks normal, the mucosal area looks normal, there is no history of trauma, there are no other features suggesting a brain tumor. You have got the MRI done and more or less it appears normal. So that can be an early sign of these conditions, Alzheimer's, Parkinsonism, or of multiple sclerosis. And also we need to know a condition that is leads to congenital anosmia, that is known as Kallmann syndrome. Kallmann syndrome. What is this condition? This is hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism. So whenever there is a patient who has come to you with decreased sense of smell, you are going to test the sense of smell and you are going to investigate the patient, go for endoscopy, rule out all these things and treat the patient accordingly. Okay, so now quickly you're going to tell me olfactory mucosa lies which part of the nasal cavity? Upper 1/3. How much air reaches the olfactory mucosa when you're breathing normally? Only 10 to 15%. What is the type of substance that you can use for smell testing? Can you use ammonia for smell testing? Yes, that's a question that is asked in your exam. Ammonia? No, because it is an irritant. It will stimulate the sensory nerve. What is phantosmia? Phantosmia is smell in the absence of, patient is perceiving smell in the absence of any smell. Which infections can lead to total anosmia, total loss of smell? Yes, viral infections very commonly. And yes, atrophic rhinitis. Can meningioma also lead to, meningioma of the frontal lobe lead to loss of smell, anosmia? Yes or no? Yes. What is cacoxmia? Yes, that is perversion of smell. Good smell appearing as bad. Age-related loss of smell is known as presbyosmia. What is Kallmann syndrome? Yes, it is congenital anosmia. So that is what we needed to know in the olfaction, how we test olfaction, and what exactly is responsible for olfaction, and what are the causes for olfactory loss. So now you're going to tell me what is the other nerve of the nose. What is the other nerve supply of the nose? So yes, one was olfaction, second was, yes, the sensory nerves. Now, what at all is the function of the sensory nerves? What do the sensory nerves in the nose do? In the nose, why do we need to have sensation? Yes, okay, very good, for mediating pain. So which means that whenever there is any infection of the nose, for example, just even a small furuncle, patient is brought to you because of the very severe pain that the patient is perceiving. So yes, pain is indicator that something is abnormal and that brings the patient to you early. So yes, it is very important. It is responsible for mediating pain. So does it mean that that is the only requirement for sensation in the nose? Only when we have any infection of the nose, that is the time we need sensory supply. Otherwise, no. We need it every moment. Yes, now when you're sitting and breathing, you are using your sensory supply of the nose. For what? Yes, we already know that whenever we breathe in, no matter how hot or how cold the external air is, in 1/4 of a second that the air takes to reach from the external nares to the posterior nares, to the corona, it gets regulated to body temperature. The temperature gets regulated to body temperature. It gets properly humidified. That is why whenever our nose is blocked and we breathe through the mouth, our throat becomes so dry, throat becomes so scratchy. So yes, that is a very, very important function of the nose, that whenever, no matter how hot or cold air is entering into the nose, what do the sensory nerves do? They sense the temperature. So they sense the temperature. Accordingly, they lead to vasodilatation. They lead to exchange of heat because of vasodilatation and temperature regulation. They reflexly lead to increase in mucosal secretions, which leads to humidification of the air. So sensory nerves, they sense and they lead to temperature regulation. And for humidification. Now, it is also responsible for sensing any irritant that has entered into the nose. So, whenever there is any irritant that enters into the nose, what happens? Yes, have you noticed you suddenly start sneezing? And there is a lot of nasal secretions also coming out from the nose at that moment. Yes, so this is mediated by the sensory nerves. So, the sensory nerves, they sense any irritant and they reflexly increase the secretion so that irritant is washed off, and also they lead to sneezing by contracting the pharyngeal and the laryngeal muscles so that irritant is not able to enter the airways. So that is for protection of the airways. So sensory nerves sense irritants, and that leads to protection of airways. Now also it is very, very important for us to know what the sensory nerve supply of the nose is. Why? Because, and that has been a repeated question of your exams. Yes, whenever we are doing any surgery on the nose, suppose we are doing a fracture reduction, suppose we are doing a rhinoplasty, septoplasty, all these can be done in local anesthesia. So we need to know which part of the nose is exactly supplied by which nerve. The sensory nerve of that particular part is by which nerve. Accordingly, we need to anesthetize. So it is very, very important for anesthesia. So now that we know that sensory nerves are so important in the nose, let us see what the sensory nerve supply of the nose is by. Now the sensory nerve supply of the nose, can you tell me the tip of the nose is supplied by what? Tip of the nose is supplied by what? The ala of the nose is supplied by what? Okay, now this has been a question of your exam. Tip of the nose is supplied by what? And then what you do is, okay, ophthalmic, maxillary, mandibular. And then, okay, this is maxillary. So is this tip of the nose supplied by the maxillary? No. This is supplied by ophthalmic. Yes, so it is not like this. You do not have to remember it like this. How do you have to remember? Like this. Exactly how it is shown in this picture. This is ophthalmic, this is maxillary, and this is mandibular. So here this is ophthalmic, this is maxillary, and this is mandibular. So this is 1. All these, yes, are branches of the trigeminal. So this is 2 and this is 3. So what we are seeing is that, yes, the sensation in the center part, this is given by the ophthalmic nerve, and ophthalmic nerve, yes, supplies a part of the inside of the nose also. Where is the ophthalmic nerve coming from? How is it coming to this area to supply? So let us quickly have a look so that you exactly understand instead of ratifying just what is happening here. So let us quickly see a little about the ophthalmic nerve. So we know that ophthalmic nerve is a branch of trigeminal. The trigeminal has the ganglion here. What is this area? The Meckel's cave. Yes, and this ganglion is known as Gasserian ganglion. Now from here are given the 3 branches of the trigeminal, ophthalmic, maxillary and mandibular. Now what we are doing is the ophthalmic. Now the ophthalmic goes out through this. You will have to tell me, yes, it exits the cranium through supraorbital fissure. Okay, does it exit the cranium through supraorbital fissure as ophthalmic nerve or as branches of ophthalmic nerve? Yes, as branches of ophthalmic nerve. So it exits through the supraorbital fissure as the 3 branches, the lacrimal. So through the supraorbital fissure it has come here and it gives 3 branches, the lacrimal to the lacrimal gland, and then we have the frontal. So it is the lacrimal, we have the frontal, and we have the nasociliary. And this nasociliary, just see here, nasociliary has naso in the name. So yes, this is the one that supplies the nose. It also gives the ciliary branches, but this is the one that mainly supplies the nose. So now let us see the nasociliary nerve. Now this has entered into the nose through the supraorbital fissure. Now this nasociliary nerves gives the branches to the nose. What are these branches? Now just notice here, see here. Can you see a small foramen here? Yes, just notice this is the optic foramen, the posterior most, okay, the big one. This is one foramen and we have another foramen here, okay. So this is this what I have marked as 1. This is known as posterior ethmoidal foramen and this is known as anterior ethmoidal foramen. The one that I have marked as 2, this is the anterior ethmoidal foramen. So these are the branches of the nasociliary. The nasociliary gives the posterior ethmoidal nerve. It gives the anterior ethmoidal nerve. And now it comes here and yes, it gives the branch which is known as infratrochlear. 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 Yes. So what is 1? 1 is the posterior ethmoidal and 2 is the anterior ethmoidal. Anterior ethmoidal. Why they are known as ethmoidal? Yes, because now they are going to this foramen is known as ethmoidal because they are the foramen. They are the opening in the ethmoidal bone. Which part of ethmoidal bone? Yes, which is the part of the ethmoid bone which separates the nose from the orbit? Yes, the lamina papyracea. So these are the foramen in the lamina papyracea, which is the part of ethmoid bone. The foramen that is posteriorly is known as posterior ethmoid. The one that is anteriorly is known as anterior ethmoid. And the nerves that pass through these foramen are known accordingly: posterior ethmoidal nerve and anterior ethmoidal nerve. Now these go inside the nose. Now just see here. The anterior ethmoidal, when it enters inside the nose, the anterior ethmoidal will now, from after piercing the cribriform plate, will give a branch to the lateral wall. It will give branch to the lateral wall, that is known as internal nasal. We will write that down in some time. And now it will traverse up till from the roof of the nose up till the septum, and it will give branches to the septum. So the sensory supply of the anterior part of the lateral wall, anterior part of the septum, is by the anterior ethmoidal branch of the ophthalmic. Which branch of ophthalmic? Nasociliary. Now just note here, the anterior ethmoidal, after supplying this one, the anterior ethmoidal, after supplying the lateral wall, it now pierces at the junction of the bone, the nasal bone and the upper lateral cartilage, and it comes out on the nose. So it comes out from here after supplying the lateral wall. So it has entered through the anterior ethmoidal foramen. After supplying the lateral wall, it gives the internal branch to the lateral wall, and it gives a branch which pierces this area, the junction of the bone and the cartilage, and it comes out to supply the external part of the nose. So it comes out and it supplies this part. This is what is known as the external nasal. This is known as external nasal. Okay, so to quickly summarize, ophthalmic gives what branch to the nose? It gives the nasociliary. The nasociliary now gives the three branches: the posterior ethmoidal, it gives the anterior ethmoidal, and it gives the infratrochlear. The anterior ethmoid then gives two branches. Anterior ethmoid gives the internal nasal, and it gives the external nasal. And this external nasal comes to supply the nose on the outside. That was simple, right? So whatever we have studied in the ophthalmic nerve culminates in this much knowledge. But yes, you have to understand it to remember it. So now this was the picture that was given in your exam. For the past 4 years consecutively, one of the anesthesia of the nose has been asked in your exam. So now tell me what, and this picture was given and was asked, what is the nerve being anesthetized here? So quickly tell me which nerve? Yes, very good, the external nasal. Quickly tell me, external nasal is a branch of anterior ethmoidal. Anterior ethmoidal is a branch of nasociliary. Nasociliary is a branch of ophthalmic. Okay, very good. Okay, so now tell me, which nerve is being anesthetized here? Yes, this was a question of this year exam. Which nerve is being anesthetized here? Yes, the infratrochlear. Now here, which nerve? Again same, infratrochlear. Which nerve is being anesthetized here? Can you see the infratrochlear was here? This is a little more medial. Yes, so what is being anesthetized here is that the anesthesia is given little more medial to go back to this area. So this is anesthetizing which nerve? Yes, whatever is in the choice. Either it can be anterior ethmoidal or nasociliary. Yes, so when this was given in the exam this year, the choices were intratrochlear, external nasal, nasociliary, anterior ethmoidal. Okay, so yes, intratrochlear is a branch of the nasociliary, but you are not anesthetizing the intratrochlear specifically by this anesthesia. In this one, you are anesthetizing the infratrochlear. In this one, you are not anesthetizing the nasociliary or the anterior ethmoidal. So we now know everything about the ophthalmic nerve. Yes, it arises from the Gasserian ganglion, exits as lacrimal frontal nasociliary through the supraorbital fissure. Yes, the one that supplies the nose is nasociliary, posterior ethmoidal, Next, quickly tell me, yes, NT8 model, infratrochlear. How we anesthetize that? That also you know, NT8 model, comes, supplies lateral wall, exits external nasal, it goes to the roof, supplies the septum. Yes, is that clear? Okay. So now coming to the next branch of the trigeminal that supplies the nose, external as well as internal. In fact, that is the main nerve giving the sensory supply of the nose inside. That is the maxillary nerve. Yes, so maxillary nerve, yes, also supplies the ala of the nose. Yes or no? Tip is supplied by ophthalmic. Ala of the nose, this lateral part, this area is supplied by the maxillary. So how did the maxillary come to the outside to supply this area, and how is it going inside the nose to supply the nose? Now let us quickly see that. Now again, we know that the maxillary is a branch of the trigeminal. Here we have in the Meckel's cave the Gasserian ganglion. Yes, we have the maxillary. Now this will exit the cranium through which foramen? Tell me, you will have to tell me this. Yes, yes, the foramen rotundum. Where here is the foramen rotundum? Let me rub this so that you can see it. Yes, this foramen here, this is the foramen rotundum. So this is the foramen rotundum. So the maxillary nerve will exit through the foramen rotundum and go where? Yes, the moment it exits through the foramen rotundum, it enters into the sphenopalatine fossa. So what is the sphenopalatine fossa? We need to know exactly, it should be absolutely clear in our mind. Sphenopalatine fossa is a very crucial area for us, very commonly asked, repeatedly asked. So let us quickly see what the sphenopalatine fossa is. Now before I show you the pictures of sphenopalatine fossa, I want you to have a three-dimensional idea, three-dimensional picture of the sphenopalatine fossa in your mind, and then we can have the real life pictures of the sphenopalatine fossa. The lateral wall of the nose is the same as medial wall of maxilla. True or false? True. Yes, when I see through the maxillary antrum, this wall appears to me as the medial wall of maxilla. Whereas when I go inside the nostril and see, the same wall appears to me as the lateral wall of nose. Yes or no? Yes. So here we have the lateral wall of the nose. This is exactly how my lateral wall of the right nostril is. Now we have the skin of the cheek here. Just below the skin of the cheek, we have the maxillary antrum, the anterior wall, the cavity and the posterior wall. So here we have the skin of the cheek, which I have removed. And now behind that, you have the maxillary antrum, right? Like this. So here is the maxillary antrum. Above that, we have the orbit here. Above the maxillary antrum, we have the orbit here. Here like this. Yes, okay. So this is the anterior wall of the antrum. Inside is the cavity and this is the posterior wall of the antrum. Now just behind this maxillary antrum, from the base of skull, hangs down two pterygoid plates. It is exactly like this. One is medial. This is the medial pterygoid plate and this is lateral. This is the lateral pterygoid plate. So it is like this. So now if I show you, it is something like this. It is like this. Can you see now? Yes. Okay, now please notice this space where my little finger is. Can you notice this space? So this space in between anteriorly the posterior border of maxillary antrum and posteriorly the anterior border of pterygoid plate, this space is what is known as the sphenopalatine or the pterygopalatine fossa. Is that clear? All the major vessels and nerves that supply the nose are present in the sphenopalatine or the pterygopalatine fossa. Now, before we do further about the sphenopalatine fossa, you are going to tell me quickly the boundaries of the sphenopalatine fossa. Yes, what is the anterior boundary? Anterior boundary is this. What is this? Quickly tell me. Yes, posterior border of maxillary antrum. Posterior boundary. What is the posterior boundary? Yes, posterior boundary is this. What is this? Yes, the anterior border of the pterygoid plate. Okay, now tell me the lateral boundary. What is the lateral boundary? Now, can you make out laterally it is open? Laterally this area is open. Yes, so this opening in between the pterygoid posteriorly and the maxillary antrum anteriorly, this is what is known as pterygomaxillary fissure. So laterally it is open through the pterygomaxillary fissure. It communicates with this area. What is this area? This area behind the cheek and lateral to the maxillary antrum. That is this area. This area that is behind the skin of the cheek, medial to the skin of the cheek and lateral to the maxillary antrum. This is what is known as the infratemporal fossa. Here we have the temporal fossa. Below that, that is the infratemporal fossa. And what is the medial boundary? Yes, see, I am going to remove this pterygoid plate so that I can explain it to you better. Okay, so now what is the medial boundary? This here is the medial boundary. What is this? Yes, can I call it the lateral wall of nose? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, now just tell me one thing, that the lateral wall of the nose, what's the posterior boundary? In the lateral wall of the nose, what are the structures? Yes, in the lateral wall of the nose, we have the three turbinates, the superior turbinate, the middle turbinate, and the inferior turbinate. What is the posterior boundary of the lateral wall of nose? Yes, the posterior boundary is the posterior border of the turbinates, where the turbinates end. That is the posterior boundary of the lateral wall of nose. Beyond that, the lateral wall of nose extends to form the lateral wall of nasopharynx. So here, this wall is the medial wall of the sphenopalatine or the pterygopalatine fossa. That is the same as the lateral wall of the nasopharynx. Why do I say lateral wall of nasopharynx? Just see here. On this medial wall is a opening. What is the significance of this opening? I told you that in the sphenopalatine or the pterygopalatine fossa are the major vessels and nerves that supply the nose. So from here, how are they going to enter into the nose? Yes, through this foramen. This foramen is known as sphenopalatine foramen, like the sphenopalatine fossa. So the vessels and nerves from the sphenopalatine foramen, they enter to supply the nose. Yes, can you see them entering? And where is this foramen? Yes, this foramen lies 1 centimeter behind the middle turbinate. So that is why I said that this opening or this wall is the lateral wall of the nasopharynx. Why? Because at the posterior border of the turbinates ends the lateral wall of nose. Beyond that, the lateral wall of nose extends to form the lateral wall of nasopharynx. So this opening of the sphenopalatine foramen is in the lateral wall of nasopharynx. Is that clear? Yes, but this is very, very important for us in the nose itself. Why? Because the major vessels and nerves that supply the nose are present in the sphenopalatine fossa. They enter through the sphenopalatine foramen to supply the nose. Is that very clear? Now let us first quickly draw the sphenopalatine fossa and see what we have understood till now. So we have the skin of the cheek, right? We have the maxillary antrum, we have the anterior wall, the cavity and the posterior wall. Here we have, above that, we have the orbits. We have the orbit. Now here from posteriorly, from the base of skull, from the sphenoid bone hangs down 2 bones. So we will first draw the base of skull. Now base of skull, is it straight or does it go slanting down? Yes, it goes slanting down. So the base of skull in this place is slanting down like this. And at the level of the sphenoid hangs down 2 bones. These are known as the pterygoid plates. These are known as the pterygoid plates, right? Now this space that we are seeing, this space that is in between the maxillary sinus anteriorly, pterygoid plate posteriorly, this is what is known as the sphenopalatine fossa. This is known as the sphenopalatine, also known as pterygopalatine fossa. Is that clear? Yes. What was the lateral boundary? Lateral boundary, you will have to tell me. Yes, lateral was pterygomaxillary fissure in between the pterygoid and the maxilla. So it is pterygomaxillary fissure. Through the pterygomaxillary fissure, it communicates with infratemporal fossa. And the medial boundary is the lateral wall of nasopharynx. In which we have the opening, the sphenopalatine foramen. Which if you see from the lateral wall of nose, where exactly is this foramen? Yes, all these are asked as question in your exams. 1 centimeter behind middle turbinate, 1 centimeter behind middle turbinate. So this is what we have understood as of now. Now in the sphenopalatine fossa are important contents. Yes, what are the contents of sphenopalatine fossa? Yes, we have the maxillary artery. We have the maxillary nerve. And we have the sphenopalatine ganglion. Sphenopalatine ganglion. So right now we are limiting ourselves to the maxillary nerve. Yes. So what we saw is that the maxillary nerve exits the cranium through which foramen? Yes, the foramen rotundum. And that, where is that foramen rotundum? That is somewhere here. Yes, that is somewhere here. This is the foramen rotundum. Foramen rotundum. Okay, now just see very carefully. Okay, so now the maxillary nerve, let me take it in green. Okay, from the foramen rotundum, see the moment it has come out, whereas it entered into the sphenopalatine fossa. And from now onwards, whenever you will read maxillary nerve, you will always see what is written. It exits the foramen rotundum to enter into the sphenopalatine fossa. So now what your mind knows, your eyes will see that. Yes. So now it has entered into the sphenopalatine fossa. Now in the sphenopalatine fossa is the ganglion, the sphenopalatine ganglion. So now it passes through the sphenopalatine ganglion without relaying. It does not relay there. It just passes through the sphenopalatine ganglion, and from here, just see here, from here it will give branches to the eye orbit. It will give branches to the maxillary sinus. It will give branches to the, what do we have below? Yes, what is below? What is this area? This area is the floor of the maxillary sinus. This is the palate. Yes, so it will give branches to the palate. So here below these openings here, we will have the greater palatine, the greater and the lesser palatine foramen, through which the branches of the maxillary, the greater palatine and the lesser palatine nerves, they will enter into the palate and supply it. Is that very, very clear? Okay, and these will also give branches to the lateral wall of nose, which will enter the nose through sphenopalatine foramen. Is that very clear? Does it end here? Does the maxillary nerve end in the sphenopalatine fossa? No. It now continues. These were the branches that it was giving to the ganglion. The main trunk of the maxillary nerve now continues forward. It enters through the infraorbital fissure and it passes through the floor of the orbit through the infraorbital canal, and now it exits just below the orbit. We have the foramen here, infraorbital foramen. So this nerve is what is known as the infraorbital nerve. Why? Because the nerve, the continuation of the maxillary nerve, which is passing through the infraorbital canal, exiting out through the infraorbital foramen. What is this nerve? This is the infraorbital nerve. So now it will come out and it will supply the orbit, it will supply the cheek, it will supply the lateral part of the external nose. So here we have the infraorbital nerve. This is the infraorbital nerve. Now, all that I have drawn in one picture, now we are going to see the real life image of the sphenopalatine fossa. Okay, now just see here. This is the sphenopalatine, also known as the pterygopalatine fossa. So here we have, this is anterior. This is this is the skull. So obviously we do not have the skin of the cheek. This is the anterior wall of the maxillary antrum. We have the cavity here. This is the posterior wall of the maxillary antrum. Yes, and these are the two pterygoid plates. The one that we are seeing, we are having a look of the skull laterally. So this is the lateral pterygoid plate. The pterygoid plates are like this. Yes, the one when you see from the lateral part of the skull, that is the lateral pterygoid, and this is the medial pterygoid. So this is the lateral pterygoid plate. Now this space that we are seeing in between, this space in between the maxillary sinus anteriorly, the pterygoid plate posteriorly, this is what is the sphenopalatine fossa. And yes, can you now tell me what is the lateral boundary of the sphenopalatine fossa? Can you see it is open laterally? Yes, what is this opening known as? It is a fissure in between pterygoid and pterygoid plate and maxilla. So it is known as pterygomaxillary fissure. Pterygomaxillary fissure. So through the pterygomaxillary fissure, the sphenopalatine fossa communicates with this area. What is this? Yes, this is the infratemporal fossa. Infratemporal fossa. So this all this area, that is the infratemporal fossa. And what is the medial boundary? Yes, the medial boundary is the lateral wall of nasopharynx. And here we are seeing the lateral wall of nose. We know that the lateral wall of nose ends at the posterior border of the turbinates. So 1 centimeter behind the middle turbinate, here we will have the opening of the sphenopalatine foramen. Sphenopalatine foramen, through which the branches of the maxillary nerve will enter the nose and will supply the nose. Is that clear? That is why whenever we have to anesthetize the nose also, where do we anesthetize it? Sphenopalatine foramen, we can anesthetize it there. And where is the foramen? 1 centimeter behind which turbinate? Behind the posterior end of middle turbinate. How did the maxillary nerve enter into the sphenopalatine fossa? Yes, through the foramen rotundum. It will enter into the sphenopalatine fossa. And where is this foramen rotundum? That is present very close to the pterygoid plate. Just see here. Yes, this here is the 2 pterygoid plates. Yes. So this here is the superorbital fissure. Here is the superorbital fissure. And this foramen. Please see carefully. At the root of the pterygoid plates, we have 2 foramen. For now, I am telling you the foramen rotundum, that is the one that is laterally present. This is the foramen rotundum. Foramen rotundum. And we know that the pterygoid plate forms which boundary of the sphenopalatine fossa? Posterior boundary. Yes. So it is entering from the foramen rotundum directly. It is coming where? Yes, it is coming directly into the sphenopalatine fossa. Here it will give the various branches. The one that will supply the nose will enter through the sphenopalatine foramen. So yes, this was the picture that was given in your exam this year and was asked. The foramen rotundum was marked and was asked what this foramen is. Yes, so that is the foramen rotundum there that you are seeing. So from here, through the foramen rotundum, the maxillary nerve is exiting, and when it is exiting out, you know exactly where it is coming out. Yes, it is coming directly into the sphenopalatine fossa, and here what all it is supplying you already know. So here we have the main branches to the nose, to the paranasal sinuses. The branches of the nose are entering 1 centimeter behind the middle turbinate to the sphenopalatine foramen, and it is coming to give sensory nerve supply to the nose. And the main nerve of the maxillary, the main branch of the maxillary which is entering through the sphenopalatine foramen is what is known as the nasopalatine nerve. It is known as the nasopalatine. Even if you do not remember this, it is okay. But yes, you have to remember the maxillary nerve complete course. Yes, is that very clear? From the Gasserian ganglion through the foramen rotundum. Yes, that is, where is that? Yes, that is in the pterygoid, root of the pterygoid plate, directly into the sphenopalatine fossa. And from the fossa, it supplies the orbit, the paranasal sinuses, below the palate, the nasal cavity. Yes, so it supplies all this area. Is that very clear? So now it extends into the infraorbital canal, exits to the infraorbital foramen to supply the skin of the cheek and to supply the lateral part of the external nose, all this area. And it gives the branches to the upper lip also. Now, has been a question in your exam, the infraorbital nerve injury can occur in which fractures? Yes, when we do fractures, we are definitely going to do that. But for now, can you tell me which fractures? So, do you know where the infraorbital nerve is? Yes. Do you know it's a continuation of what? Maxillary nerve. So, in which fractures? Yes, what is this area? This is the zygomatic bone. So, yes, in zygomatic bone fracture. Where is this area lying exactly? Below the orbit. So, flow of orbit fractures. Below here we have the maxilla, so maxillary fractures. Yes, so you do not have to just cram up. If you just know, you just have to know that yes, this can be the answer, this cannot be the answer. Now also has been asked, in which fractures, the same thing has been asked as, in which fractures can there be anesthesia of the cheek? Anesthesia of cheek, so you should know anesthesia of cheek means sensation of cheek is by which nerve? Which nerve? Infraorbital nerve. So again, what they are asking by this question is the same. In which fractures can the infraorbital nerve be injured? So again, it will be the same fractures. So a quick revision for you. Yes, quickly tell me the boundaries of the sphenopalatine fossa anteriorly. Anteriorly is, yes, the posterior wall of maxillary antrum. Posterior wall of maxillary antrum. Yes, all this I'm not going to write again. You will write it best. Yes, okay. Posterior is anterior wall of pterygoid plate. Medial is lateral wall of nasopharynx with the sphenopalatine foramen. And lateral, quickly tell me, lateral pterygomaxillary fissure through which it communicates with infratemporal fossa. What are the contents? Yes, we have the maxillary artery, we have the maxillary nerve, and we have the sphenopalatine ganglion. What is the significance of sphenopalatine foramen? Yes, we have the nerves and vessels from the sphenopalatine fossa enter into the nose. And we have another very important significance of the sphenopalatine foramen. What is that significance? This sphenopalatine foramen is the site of origin of angiofibroma. And this, we are not going to do angiofibroma. About angiofibroma, we are not going to do anything more here or in the nose. Why? Yes, because this is arising from the sphenopalatine foramen. And where is the sphenopalatine foramen? Is it a part of the nose or the nasopharynx? Yes, it is arising from the foramen, that is a part of the lateral wall of nasopharynx. So we will do it in detail when we do the nasopharynx. But for now, I'm just letting you know here so that when you hear sphenopalatine foramen, this thing should come to your mind. It is a site of origin of angiofibroma. So now tell me which nerve is being anesthetized here. What is being anesthetized here? Yes, and this is anesthesia of the sphenopalatine at the sphenopalatine foramen. Yes, so it can be done with the help of a cotton swab, or it can be done through a syringe through the sphenopalatine foramen. Anesthetic can be injected into the sphenopalatine fossa to anesthetize the sphenopalatine ganglion. So this is the sphenopalatine ganglion block. Can you do it in any other way? Yes. Can you anesthetize it like this also? What is being done here? Yes. Can you anesthetize it? Some idea you have what is being done here? Yes. Can you anesthetize it by putting the anesthetic in this area? What is this area? This is the opening of the greater palatine foramen here. Yes, from here the maxillary nerve, I told you, gives branches to the palate also. So yes, can you anesthetize this nerve, the sphenopalatine ganglion, by injecting the anesthetic here? Yes, you can. So what is this area? This area is exactly this. In other words, this area is this here. This here through the greater palatine foramen. You can inject the anesthetic, and that falls little medial to the third molar. So what you're doing here is again a little medial to the third molar, that again you are anesthetizing the sphenopalatine ganglion. Sphenopalatine ganglion, or you can call it the greater palatine nerve, you are blocking here. Now which nerve is being anesthetized here? Yes, that was easy, the infraorbital nerve. Infraorbital nerve. Infraorbital nerve is a branch of maxillary. Maxillary is a branch of trigeminal. Okay. So here which is anesthetized? What do you think? Which one? Again the infraorbital. The infraorbital. So the infraorbital nerve can be anesthetized in two ways. Yes, just see here. It can be anesthetized by directly injecting the anesthetic in this area, or it can be anesthetized from sublabially by injecting the anesthetic into injecting the anesthetic up, reaching this area of the infraorbital foramen. Is that very clear? Now quickly you're going to tell me the complete course of the maxillary nerve. Yes, from the Gasserian ganglion out through the foramen rotundum. Foramen rotundum, where is that? Yes, at the root of the pterygoid plate directly, it is into the sphenopalatine fossa. Yes, do you know the boundaries of the sphenopalatine fossa? Yes or no? Tell me how the nerve, the maxillary nerve from the sphenopalatine fossa enters into the nose. Yes, through the sphenopalatine foramen, 1 centimeter behind which turbinate? Middle turbinate. So then it comes and gives supply to the sensory supply to the lateral wall of the nose. What is the lateral opening of the sphenopalatine fossa? What is that known as? Pterygomaxillary fissure. Yes, through which the sphenopalatine fossa communicates with infratemporal fossa. So yes, that is what you needed to know about the maxillary nerve. The sensory supply now we know is by the ophthalmic and it is by the maxillary. Tip of the nose is supplied by ophthalmic. Ala of the nose is by maxillary. Yes, in which fractures of the face will there be anesthesia of the cheek? If there is anesthesia of the cheek following any fracture of the face, which nerve has got injured? Infraorbital. Infraorbital is the continuation of maxillary.